Hi, thank you for stopping by for another episode of All Things Considered. Today I'm talking about something that caught my eye in a new article that came out just recent. It says homeless camp sweeps are up. Is Seattle shuffling them out of sight? That's an appropriate title because I understand what's going on here. Because where I live at is in Minneapolis, Minnesota, right? And where I live at, I live in an apartment building that has a lot of varied styles of people that live here. And some people have a harder time keeping things together than others. But once a year they do an apartment inspection. And that's just to kind of help those that that have a very hard time mentally stabilizing their living arrangements. Some are hoarders, some are just filthy dirty, some are just nasty, some can't help it, and some can. I know when it comes time for me to pick stuff up in my apartment, I tend to grab a bag and I just put everything in the bag. If I got stuff on my couch, I just shove everything into a bag. Then I sort it later. I'm thinking that Seattle's doing the same thing with the homeless encampments. They're sweeping them under the rug, sort of, or they're throwing everybody into a big bag and they're moving the bag out of sight because there's an upcoming election. And instead of fixing the homeless problem, instead of figuring out what to do, they're just kind of sweeping everything under the rug. It says here, without any announcement or fanfare, the city of Seattle has seemingly ramped up sweeps of homeless encampments this year, more than during the same time last year. For some odd reason, Seattle, the city council, is really putting the kibosh on some things, or they're making it look like they're putting the kibosh on stuff. Not that you would know any of this was happening since the city hasn't publicized it. You can't always tell people what you're going to do ahead of time because it gives them a chance to try to stop you. You just got to go ahead and do it. Mayor Durkan doesn't want to make a sleeping beast, which might get upset with the fact that people are being asked to move. It says here, Mayor Durkan doesn't want to wake a sleeping beast, which might get upset with the fact that the people are being asked to move. 75% more encampments were removed in the first 4 months of 2019. That's 93 sweeps. Then the same time, they did this more in the 4 months than in the same time last year at 11. The rise in sweeps appears to be partly due to change of strategy in which the city is responding to the smaller encampments faster and taking a long-term approach to the bigger ones. Well, you can take a long-term approach, but you gotta put your foot down and you gotta nail it to the floor. You got to keep your foot there, and you got to stick with your priorities, and you got to stick with what you say you're going to do. Seattle's at stake here, man. The life of Seattle is on life support. Seattle's on life support. Removal of the larger camps must involve 72-hour notice and offer of shelter, which city rules do not require for smaller encampment cleanups. If you respond to the little ones faster, that actually might settle down the citizenry that's so outraged because they seem to be popping up out everywhere. Now, I have to say this, it's the small encampments that seem to be the trashiest. The larger encampments, they seem to keep a little neater, I guess you would say. They're keeping a little neater because the city clamps down on them harder and they're more visible. The smaller camps are floating around the Seattle area and are not as visible, so they have a tendency to be more drug-addled and more alcoholism. Now, I'm not saying all homeless are like that. Everybody living in a camp or living in a tent doesn't drink or do drugs. There's some that live outside because they like it. They can't handle living inside. Now, it says here, the cleanups aren't necessarily a sign of progress, but rather a shuffling that's put the issue out of view. If you make it out of view, 9 times out of 10, it's going to not be brought up very much. You tell 2 people that are living in a little light setup tent area in some spot they found, hey, you can't stay here. So they get up, they leave, and where do they go? Well, they end up going down the street to a bigger kind of encampment with a bunch of other people, Curley said. What they're doing is they're trying to push them out of view. So they're sending them back behind railroad tracks, back behind buildings, back away from the general view. Now, I know this because I used to work in the homeless. I used to work for homeless shelters, and I used to work with homeless people. And even for a time, I was homeless. But the workers that go to work in the morning, they don't want to see the homeless. So they get the homeless up real early and get them out of the shelters. Then they get the homeless back into the shelters after the workers have went home to work. People in cities do not like the homeless, but they can kind of tolerate the homeless as long as they don't have to see them. The latest homeless count for Seattle and King County showed that there are 11,199 people experiencing homelessness countywide. That's probably like in the homeless shelters. They can't really tally up everybody that's outside because there's no telling where everybody's at. It says approximately 5,971 people were sheltered, which covers emergency shelters, safe havens, and transitional housing. And 5,227 people unsheltered living in vehicles, tents, or encampments. Specifically, 2,147 individuals were living in vehicles and 1,276 persons were living in tents or unsanctioned encampments. We don't see them, but they still continue to live there that way. City Hall doesn't get the complaints that say, hey, there's a homeless tent in my neighborhood. Now, Seattle is taking a big eyesore, and instead of folding the clothes and instead of putting things away in their proper place, they are just bunching up everything into a bag, and they're just sticking the bag in a spot out of the way so nobody notices it. That's what they're doing with the homeless encampments. And something's got to be done about it. I talk till I'm blue in the face. People ask me why I care, and I tell them it's because of this. I love you, Seattle. I love everything about you, except for the bad side of you, the people that have moved there. I don't care for the transplants unless the transplants that moved there consider Seattle to be their home. But if you want to get involved and you have things that you can possibly help me with, I mean, I talk to the city council a lot. I give them ideas, and I send things to the, and they even occasionally will look at my videos that I put up just to see what I'm saying. I talk to a lot of people. I do a lot of things. I write the mayor. The city council's getting a little annoyed with me now because they think I'm beating a dead horse. They're just trying to bide their time until the next election. But anyway, between now and 2025, I have seriously thought about running for mayor of Seattle. I have seriously considered it because something's got to get done, and it's not getting done now. The ones that are rich enough to afford to not be bothered by the homeless and the drug problems and all of that, and the high cost of living, the ones that can just move from one area to another, get an apartment for like $5,000 a month or $3,000 a month or whatever, those are the people that don't give a crap less about what happens to Seattle. They've got enough money to not worry. It's everybody else that has to worry. Post a comment, hit the like and subscribe. I would love to have you in my family. This has been All Things Considered, because I consider all things. Have a good night, Seattle, and all points beyond.